Who developed the technology that led to the downfall of the Necrons, the biotransference, and who is now best placed to restore them to their former place under the watchful eye of the Silent King? Illuminor Szeras. That's the person you need. So welcome friends to another 40k video. We'll be drawing on various Necron codexes and the Pariah Nexus book for lore on Illuminor Szeras. The Satan might have provided the knowledge for biotransference, but it was Szeras who made it a reality. Even then, he saw it as the first of several steps on the path to ultimate evolution, a journey that would end as a creature, not of flesh or metal, but as a god of pure energy, perhaps the Necrons trying to imitate their gods at the time, the Satan. Until that day, Szeras is driven to take full advantage of his android form. After all, no longer must he sleep, nor deal with the thousand frailties and distractions to which flesh is heir. Szeras labours to unravel the mysteries of life, for he fears that he would be a poor sort of god without the secrets of life at his fingertips. Szeras has been on the brink of understanding for many centuries, yet somehow final comprehension always escapes him. Perhaps there are some concepts in the universe that do not reveal themselves so easily, or perhaps it's simply that to understand life, the observer must stand amongst the ranks of the living, and this is no longer an option for this Necron. Whatever the reason, the truth is that the secrets of the soul will almost certainly lie forever beyond Szeras's comprehension. This is a truth that he will never accept. Yet at times Szeras must turn aside from his work and act in the interests of others. He requires a constant flow of living subjects, and the most efficient way for him to acquire such creatures is to trade expertise in exchange for captives. Though Szeras is obsessed with the secrets of life, his aptitude for augmenting the weaponry and even the mechanical bodies of his fellow Necrons is peerless. Szeras, delving into the form and function of so many disparate living creatures, has taught him how to augment almost every facet of Necron machinery, a trait seen as distasteful by many of his peers. The dissection of Vuz-Salan arachnoid compound eyes unlocks an improved array for targeting optics, and the molecular disassembling of chitinous amble hide led the way to more efficient armor configurations, to name but two of the many thousands of such advances that he has come across. On occasion, Szeras's talents are in such demand that he can name his own price, invariably a harvesting raid targeted against a world of his choosing. Above all, Szeras cherishes Eldar subjects, perhaps because of their old rivalry where the Eldar were allied with Old Ones. And Szeras sees the Eldar inevitably provide more intriguing results than any other of the galaxy's creatures. However, few Necron lords will deliberately transgress on Eldar territory for reasons other than solid military gain, so Szeras finds such specimens the hardest of all to acquire. Szeras inevitably accompanies the initial waves of such an attack, the better to pick and choose the subjects that will make up his payments, and ensure he is not cheated by his client. Once seized, Szeras's specimens can look forward only to a pain-filled, though not necessarily brief, existence in the blood-stained and shadowed laboratory catacombs of Zantragora. I'm getting a Fabius Bile feel here for this guy. Few of Szeras's operations are carried out on the dead, but he believes the knowledge he seeks resides only in the living. Banks of stasis machinery keep the subject alive and aware throughout the procedures, though they do nothing to numb the terrible pain. The specimen's agonized screams are of no consequence to Szeras, as he feels no kinship with such inferior beings. He simply shuts off his audio receptors until the repulsive noise subsides, watching impassively as his whirring tools carve the subject apart, molecule by molecule. And now we'll go over two little bits of the lore from a later codex. The first is that Szeras is aligned with the Silent King. The Silent King who has been able to get the Illuminor into his service, as the Silent King now regrets what has befallen his people. After all, if the Illuminor wrought biotransference, then surely he can reverse the process's effects, and perhaps in doing so garner the final revelations that he has sought for so long. So, him coming under the wing of the Silent King does make a certain sense. And of course, Szeras is involved in the incident in the Pariah Nexus. It is a matter of some speculation how much involvement Szeras had in the design and implementation of the Pariah Nexus, but none can question that he is taking full advantage of its effects. Hundreds of thousands of stilled beings have already vanished into the Illuminor's horrible laboratories, and his harvest continues apace. So before we go over the wider story of Szeras in the Pariah Nexus, let's answer this question. What on earth is the Pariah Nexus itself? It's an area in space that is free from the influence of the warp. How has this been achieved? Through Necron engineering. The effects of the warp are suppressed, as is the case around a Pariah, one who serves the Emperor as one of the Sisterhood of Silence. Blackstone has been made into a massive array. This great achievement of cosmic engineering has meant that the area in that system has created a field of what's dubbed, call it anti-warp energy. My understanding of the Blackstone, it can absorb and expel warp energy. So in this case, it looks like it's absorbing it and creating a Pariah Nexus region for the Necron dynasty. However, during the Indomitus Crusade, it comes to the intention of a battle group, Calidus, serving the Imperium, and a war comes to this place. Those who fight in the area feel the effects of the warp dampening field, I'll dub it. And now let's jump in with Szeras and see his role within this conflict. Szeras observes that the humans are somewhat immune to the effects of this great device he's helped create. He and his cryptex, which is basically the role of a scientist within Necron society, laboured tirelessly, dissecting specimens from myriad battlefields as they tried to understand what psychic discipline the humans were employing. And I love this little bit. Their victims' claims of miracles and faith were discarded as a primitive prattle. The Necrons very much showing themselves there as not being in touch with the humanity that they once had. The Necrons had met their gods, after all, and shattered them. They were not to believe that the deities of the lesser races had the power to resist where the Satan had failed. While Szeras plied his science, the war raged on. Those aligned with the Imperium of man were able to ward off or battle the effects of the Pariah Nexus area with the aid of vast congregations of fanatical preachers who packed their decks and whipped their crews into a frenzy. But they've not at this stage been able to damage a single Necron pylon. And there is an Inquisitor you should note here, Lord Inquisitor Kyria Draxus, who will be important as this story rolls on. Draxus picks the target of the Tredica system. There, she sees footage that revealed 3 worlds dragged from their alignment to hang around an immense night-black artifact in the void. Energy signatures suggested that at least one pylon was present upon each of the 3 worlds, while the survivors' harrowing accounts provided Draxus with further details of the interiors of several Xenos tombs. Whatever this artifact was, it was the structure she would need to reach to plunder its secrets. So she created a task force made up of Death Watch, Black Templars, Battle Sisters, Tempestus Scions, and a conclave of tech magi from the Forge world of Styges 8. They would go there to gain intelligence to help the battle group Calidus. The Tempestus Scions that had escaped Tredica held a secret. Illuminor Szeras, who also sought answers, had implanted them with mind-shackled scarabs before their release. He reasoned that whatever champions the humans sent to Tredica, they would be excellent subjects for interrogation. Their knowledge, Szeras hoped, would allow them to at least exterminate the human infestation. The Illuminor's master awaited confirmation of the Nodal Matrix's success. Any pitiful resistance from the human vermin needed to be swiftly and mercilessly stamped out. In this Szeras had erred. Kyria Draxus had seen the effects of mind-shackled scarabs before and recognized his trap. Thus, she was going in not only with her eyes open, but accompanied by a military asset she did not believe the Necrons could possibly account for. Ephrael Stern. Now, who is Ephrael Stern? She is a sister of battle of the Order of the Martyred Lady, and through her faith she gained psychic powers greater than those of an ordinary psyker. One of her titles is the Demon Fuge. Inquisitor Draxus led her own force in the True Strike on Tredica Adaxis. This was the largest of the 3 worlds slaved to the ominous void obelisk. It was this world that gave off the strongest energy signatures in the system, and from here that these scarab-enslaved Tempestus Scions had, in quotes, escaped. The planet had been a prosperous hive world. The Necrons' galactic engineering had subjected the planet to terrible stresses. Its 3 Necron pylons of colossal size rose from the planet's surface, one from its frozen night side, another from its scorched day side, and the third and largest from the hazy band of the planet's time-locked turbinator. It was towards this pylon that Draxus's inquisitorial cruiser crept. She was able to sneak down to the planet, settling into orbit a handful of miles from the peak of the pylons, which was so vast that it rose into the void. So close, the pylon's effects were punishing. Preachers patrolled the decks and corridors in thronging mobs, their howled prayers and sanctified incense intended to shield the crew from the threat of stilling. As those in orbit got down to the surface and gunships dusted off, Illuminor Szeras sprang his trap. Shimmering green portals unfurled, and from them shrieked flights of doomsides and nightsides. The former shot through the retreating Imperial gunships, sending several spiraling in flames. The nightsides, meanwhile, ran their invasion beams across the ruins surrounding Draxus's forces. Where before there had been only ash and rubble and blackened corpses, now there stood an elite force of Necron Immortals and Leech Guard, arrayed in a noose about the Imperial forces. Kyria Draxus recognized the spindle-limbed figure of Illuminor Szeras at their head and knew suddenly who the author of all this misery must be. The enforcers of the Inquisitor are addressed to surrender. Szeras says, "Lesser vermin, you trespass amidst the realm of beings beyond your stunted comprehension. Your presence dirties that which had been sterilized of organic contaminants and cannot be borne. Understand that the blame for this rests not upon your shoulders, but upon mine. I have baited this simple trap, and like the primitive post-simian carbon-based beings that you are, you scurried eagerly into its jaws. It could not have been otherwise. The fear, the confusion, and the aggression that you are feeling, these are all natural responses from your underdeveloped cortices to such sudden and overwhelming stimuli. However, it is important that you master those base urges and set down your weapons without resistance. I would prefer to preserve your physical integrity for optimal interrogation, but to understand all I require are your brain." Draxus refused the Necron commander's surrender demand, and instead employed the knowledge she had pieced together from the Scion's helm vids. She gleaned that Necron teleportation gates riddled this site, and in secret with the Xenorite tech magi, had been able to determine something of their operation, pretty impressive for the Imperium's technological view. Rather than reeling in terror and shock, as Szeras had expected, the Imperial forces gunned their engines and smashed through the Necron's cordon towards the nearest teleportation gate. Bolters and turret guns blazed as APCs ploughed through the ruins and scattered Szeras's ambushes. The Necrons were quick to react, and more than one Imperial transport was crippled. Yet the Imperial forces raced on, reaching the energy wreath portal they sought. Disembarking into the hostile atmosphere, the tech magi rushed to suborn the gate's alien machine spirit, even as the Death Watch and Battle Sisters laid down furious covering fire. Necron stalked closer by the moment. Szeras blasted Imperial warriors to ash with his eldritch lance and hissed for reinforcements to attend him. Before he could overrun the defenders, however, the tech magi prevailed. There was a flare of energy, and Draxus and her warriors vanished. Szeras's irritation became pure anger as delayed charges laid by the Death Watch exploded and destroyed the portal, thus halting any attempts he would have made of pursuit. Draxus, Stern, and their comrades found themselves somewhere deep within what they presumed must be the maze of structures around the pylon's base. Disorientated by the weird geometrics, glimmering witch-lights, alien machineries, and maze-like confines, they followed the distorted returns of their auspexes. Draxus sought devices the Xenorites described as mnemonic crystals, repositories of Necron knowledge that she had spotted in the Scion's helm vids, and which with time and resources, the Xenorites could plunder for information. The Imperial force had to fight for every step. Canoptek constructs flowed from the darkness to be driven off by hammering bolt fire, and with the numbers looking in favour of the Necrons, it was Ethereal Stern who led them to their destination. Letting the Emperor guide her steps, the demon Fuge led the way to a vast chamber in which immense stalactites and stalagmites of Necron machinery thrummed and glowed. At their heart hung a towering humanoid figure, whose body was wrought from living flame, and who writhed and screamed endlessly amidst crackling webs of emerald energy. There was no time to speculate as to what end this Tramal Satan shard was being put. Barely had the Imperial forces arrived when fresh waves of enemies descended from the shadows to attack. Alerted by her Xenite allies, Draxus spotted the crystal she sought, bound into a lattice of hovering machineries near the chained Satan. Ordering the Deathwatch and Battle Sisters to form a defensive perimeter, the Inquisitor went to work, she and the Tech Magi labouring to extract the magnetic crystals. Wave upon wave of Necrons fell upon the shrinking Imperial cordon. Bolt shells blasted android bodies apart. Plasma and hissing melter blasts annihilated more. Yet, for every Necron that vanished amidst shimmering energies, another rose to fight. At this point, Szeras appears amidst their rear lines with a potent arsenal of war engines in tow. Even the zealous Battle Sisters and veteran Deathwatch could not hold their position as Doomday Arcs and Triarch Stalkers rained fire down upon them. Entire kill teams were blasted to ash. Squads of Retributors died to the last, still pouring fire into the foe even as they were overrun by black-eyed Necrons. Stern and Kaganel fought back-to-back, resolved to battle to the last against this mutual hated foe. It was in that moment that Inquisitor Draxus cried out in triumph, for she had finally extracted the crystals she sought. The effort had slain 4 of the Xenorites, reducing their bodies to scorched husks, but enough remained to plunder the crystals. Could they only escape? Yet Draxus saw she had taken too long. The Necrons were closing in on every side, while her own forces were barely a tenth of their starting strength. A fighting retreat was no longer an option, for even if by some miracle they managed to escape, this ravaged force would never survive the perils of the tomb complexes long enough to find their way to freedom. Coolly assessing the few options that remained to her, Draxus did the only thing she could. She turned her power fist on the machinery that bound the Satan in place and smashed it to sparking ruin, almost kind of proving there what the Necron Szeras had earlier said about them. It's brutal but effective, but it gives little thought. If the Inquisitor had hoped to cause the mayhem required to cover their retreat, she had achieved her aim and more besides. Eldritch lightning exploded in all directions as the Satan's cage collapsed. It was followed by blasts of flowing flame as the shard vented its fury upon those who had imprisoned it. Draxus, Stern, Kaganel, and their few remaining allies gathered themselves to flee as the Necrons shifted their fire to the unleashed shard. Szeras's hissed commands had taken on a panic tone, and it seemed that for the moment the human intruders had been forgotten, yet still their chances seemed slim. It was then that Draxus felt her flesh crawl beneath the regard of an entity impossibly ancient and alien. She looked up into the blazing visage of the Satan as it raised one hand to point directly at her. The Lord Inquisitor braced herself, knowing that surely her death in the Emperor's service was at last at hand. Instead, reality gave a sudden nauseating lurch. Everything blazed with light and heat, but when Draxus opened her eyes, she was still alive. Her and her surviving allies had been transported out of the Necron tomb and back to the bridge of their cruiser in orbit. As the alarmed yells of the guards quietened, it became clear that, for whatever ineffable reason of its own, the Satan Shard had saved Inquisitor Draxus and her comrades, perhaps a reward for freeing it, or perhaps a attempt to screw over the Necron that had captured it. Pragmatic as ever, Draxus vowed to consider the implications of this bizarre event later. For now she commanded the task force to retreat and make for Imperial line. And as for Szeras, in this situation, with the release of the Satan Shard at the heart of the pylon, he lost interest and became deeply desperate to contain the raging Star God. Reading that through with you here, it's kind of the first time I've really properly been over that story and the definition of the Pariah Nexus. It's an interesting scientific experiment by the Necrons. If you think about it, if they could do it here on a small scale, is it something with the right quantity of black stone, which they seem to have quite a lot of, and perhaps somewhere that it was mined from in the memory of one of the Necrons still around, and if they can find that place, is there something they could scale up and attempt to do on a larger level to cut off the galaxy from the effects of the Imperium? Perhaps, but I don't strictly see how that aligns with the want of the Necrons to be returned to their flesh bodies. But something interesting to think about. And on that note, friends, I'll wrap up today's longer than intended video.